Welcome to Movies That Matter, a podcast about recent films going beyond basic film criticism to boldly explore a social issue affecting people's lives. I'm Nicole Finari, and with me today is...
Justin.
And Stacy.
And what movie are we overanalyzing this for?
Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse.
Okay, so we're kind of going to be talking about Into the Spider-Verse as well, to sort of state of the state as we are now with two movies, which I was very like, oh no, this is not ending. Things are not happening. This is going to need a sequel, and I'm mad about this. Like, I was like, oh no. Did not know there was supposed to be another one, and I was expecting a clean ending. So, Miles Morales catapults across the multiverse where he encounters this team of people charged with protecting its very existence. When the heroes clash on how to handle a new threat, Miles must redefine what it means to be a hero. All right. Who wants to go first on what we think about this new version of Spider-Man?
I'll start since I have a background of being a pretty big comic book nerd, as people who know me will attest. I love the Miles Morales character and what they've done, and also the way they were able to just flesh out the whole entire Spider-Verse, so to speak, with just the variations that some from comic publishing and some that they created for the film. But I thought the movie was incredible.
This is good that we have someone who is familiar with the comics and somebody who's not, i.e. myself. I will say that when you've seen as many films as the people in this room have seen, at my age anyway, I've gotten to the point where I feel like I've seen it all. You know, like every movie I see, I'm kind of like, the best I can hope for is that it'll be like, okay, this was a solid film. You know, it was good, well executed. I enjoyed myself. I never thought that I would ever again go into a movie and feel the way I felt when I was 7 years old and saw The Little Mermaid for the first time. And that is how I felt watching this movie. This movie is the first time that I've actually felt something in my cold, dead heart in a theater in years. There was a point about 20 minutes in where I had to suppress a scream of joy.
Oh, I expressed nothing, and we'll get to my comments as I watched it, which were pretty loud. So I was very resistant to this. I did not see the first one when it came out or was on streaming, and then you both really wanted to do this one. I was like, all right, I'll see the first one. We'll do this one. And then I saw the first one, and I was like, that was lit. I was like, what? Why was this so good? I mean, I know why it's so good, and the whole point of this podcast is going to be to explain it, but I was, blown away. And I will say two things since you referenced The Little Mermaid. Number one, I have long maintained, I have stayed as far away from freaking Spider-Man as I possibly can since Tobey Maguire. It looks stupid. It always looks stupid flying around. It never looks good. We don't have the technology yet to pull off a live-action Spider-Man. It looks silly every time, and I hate it. So having an animated Spider-Man is 100% the only good way to do a Spider-Man movie these days. And then to the point about Little Mermaid, I was like, one of the things that's very irritating about the live-action remakes, which are not really live-action anyway, is what you lose, and what seems to be a dying art, is the animation. And the animation in this is so good.
Glorious.
The first one, incredible. And to me, this one takes it to a whole nother level with just the animation style and the coloring. It's just visually stunning.
The first one revolutionized animation, right? After Into the Spider-Verse, animated films went away from that photorealistic Pixar look. And Puss in Boots, Last Wish, you have, Mitchell's versus the Machines. Everyone started moving towards that more stylized look because of Into the Spider-Verse. And they pioneered that.
And agreed. And then the animation in the second one was even better. And
yes.
Better.
I loved they kept the comic book stuff.
Yes.
I will say, I was talking to Lexi about this after I saw it. I don't know about you guys. I am a very fast reader. And even I was like, things were not on screen long enough for me to actually read them. That was the only complaint I have about the animation. I was like, no one can read that fast. Put that little blurb back up.
Especially when they were like introducing like just various versions of Spider-Man or Spider-Woman.
Mm-hmm. It was like they threw everything at you, and they were just like, just catch what you can.
Yeah,
You
Right.
know?
which is fair.
But a thousand person crew to make this film. 1,000 people, 3 directors.
I mean, I can see why.
Yeah.
And it's just like an incredible vision that just came together. Like, even with like, I didn't realize it was like on that scale, but especially for an animated movie, and it just felt very unique. And I love Into the Spider-Verse, and this movie just really blew me away.
Like, Godfather 2 can kick rocks. This is the best sequel I've ever seen.
Yeah, I agree. I think... So, like, okay, so first and first, like, I'm looking at my notes. I want to clear up one thing because I had to double check this. I noticed it in the first film. There's a lot of references to 42, which then become more obvious in the second film. And in my head, I was like, I don't know if this is a Jackie Robinson thing or a Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy thing. It is a Jackie Robinson thing.
Okay, fair.
It's from the comics, Brooklyn Dodger, fair enough. But I was like, it could easily have been a Hitchhiker thing and I would have been just as excited. So I wanted to clear that up. Number 2, like, for part of what I liked about the second one, I like to think that I have a very special talent of recognizing people's voices. The spot was, I was like,
Who is
I
that?
know it! I was like, it's not Sam Rockwell. I was making me crazy. And I will admit, I didn't get there before the credits rolled.
For me, it was him and Miguel O'Hara.
Miguel O'Hara.
I know him. I love him.
Yeah.
Who is it?
I was like, Jason Isaacs right away. When they hit Mumbattan, I think...
Give me Oscar Isaac.
Yeah,
Oscar Isaac, sorry.
Yeah.
Oh, he opens his mouth and I'm like, it's Karen Sonny! Like, I yelled it out in the movie theater. I was like, it's Karen Sonny! Like, I will admit, he has a distinctive voice.
Mm.
But also, I am low-key obsessed with that dude. Like, he is literally one of the funniest people on the planet. And, like, he's kind of that guy, like, sleeper actor that people... He works nonstop. You've seen him in a ton of things, but I think I'm, like, one of the few people who actually knows him by name.
It's so many great voice actors. I think my personal favorite was Daniel Kaluuya as Spider-Punk.
Hobie!
Yeah.
You know, I got it right away. I was like, that guy is so cool. I was like, how much you want to bet that's Daniel Kaluuya? Like, in my head, I was like, all right, I'm 3 for 4. I feel all right.
So dreamy to finally get to hear him use his authentic accent in a film.
So his animation, I guess, like, all the reviews I read had sort of referenced, like, zine, like a punk 90s zine look.
Oh yeah, that's exactly what they were going for.
I thought it was a Banksy reference.
It looked very
Which
graffiti
may
to me as well.
Be the same thing.
But they inform each other.
Right, yeah. Especially because there was, like, a Banksy joke in this one, and there was a Banksy joke in the first one. I was like,
but that
someone really
aesthetic.
likes Banksy. So, the voice talent in this one was, like, killing it.
Just, off the walls. Off the walls. Along with, like, all the different styles of, animating each character, the art of each character, including Donald Glover.
Oh,
yes,
yeah,
yes.
What a treat.
I was
What a treat.
Yeah, because he was a version of the Prowler, like in the live action MCU, where like they're like, oh yeah, Aaron Davis. I'm pretty sure that's the name that they use for him. But yeah, there's a lot of Easter eggs.
there were. Well, and also like the clips to the other films that they showed, which I thought were woven in and really well done.
The whole Lego verse was delightful.
Yeah.
And then like the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man, where they were showing
Andrew
him,
Garfield shows up in canon, all the canon shots. And I loved Earth 42 because the second he got there, I remember thinking, like, this doesn't look right to me. The animation doesn't feel quite the same. Do I just not remember it?
Well, and also there was a difference that I was pointed out to me afterwards. The mother has a different color eyes.
Has green eyes.
Yes, she has green eyes.
Mom has green eyes.
Yep.
You noticed.
I did. And at first I was sitting there and I was like, is the light reflecting differently? Because it looks like her eyes are green. And I was like, her eyes are green. And then I was like,
wait.
he's not in the right. I didn't get the connection of like sending him to the spider
Because
thing.
the spider.
I'll admit,
yeah.
like I didn't figure that out, but I twigged because again, and it was so cleverly done because the minute he gets there, you're like, this doesn't.
Something's off.
It's
something's
slightly
off.
off.
It
It's
is.
similar, but just slightly off.
And it was like brilliant animation because I
Yeah.
couldn't tell you from having seen it once what doesn't feel.
What I loved is the animation wasn't just look, hey, look what we can do. Let's just throw everything we can do at them. It all had a point.
Mhm.
It all
Yeah.
served the story. Like when Gwen Stacy is talking to her dad, having the big conversation.
Oh yeah, the colors in the background.
The colors of the walls are
It
like
shows her
reflecting
emotions.
her emotions like in real time. So beautiful.
Yeah, and especially kind of had like that watercolor aesthetic. I just loved how that looked in her universe.
I love how they framed Gwen this time and not
Mhm.
Miles.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like it was, felt like the opening, how the
Like, she
first
starts
10,
in that.
10 yeah, first 10, 15 minutes is about her, and again how it ends with her too.
Mm-hmm.
And just also like the animation too, where she's dealing with like the vulture from like the Renaissance universe.
The
Just a
Da
really
Vinci
yes,
vulture.
yeah, Da Vinci vulture.
good.
Like tearing up the Guggenheim.
Yeah, which is
Oh,
like
so fun.
so painful to watch.
Oh, that's what I meant by fun.
Yeah. I did feel like there were some Quantum Leap references in the
Oh, really?
in the multiverse worlds, whatever where they were, where all the spider people were together. But that may have just been me. Like when they're building so you have the little hologram that's like following him around, which is a very Quantum Leap. Although I guess it was in the comics as well. And then when they do the like send them back to their worlds, they have all these like pastel colored like polygons that look like the little fake device that's
Oh, okay.
Talk about the wristband device they were.
No, the spider builds a thing and then it goes all colored and then they go through the portal.
Oh yeah. I
and it looks like
What's his face is?
Al's little fake iPod, pre-iPod-y thing with the like colored squares on it. And I was like, is that intentional? I don't know. But I'm like, I'm here for any Quantum Leap reference anybody might have.
Sure. I like I said, I'm completely ignorant of any Spider-Man reference that's not in a movie from, since 2000. So for me, it was like just such a smorgasbord of novelty and visuals to just see all of these spider people and animals, like a spider. Wasn't there a spider horse?
I was
like,
at one
was
point,
Spider
there's
Ham
a
in
spider
it?
cat.
Yeah, yes.
Spider quote unquote people.
And spider
There's a spider
entities.
T-Rex.
Yeah, there's a spider T-Rex. There was a spider T-Rex. And I was like, gosh, I wonder if there's a comic strip for like every single one of these. That was just such a nice thing to contemplate.
Yeah, it was so creative. Like it never felt like they ran out of ideas. Like it just felt
Right.
like they had even more ideas than they could possibly fit in the movie.
I mean, a friggin' 8-month pregnant
Yes.
black, a woman of color spider person
that was the best.
on a motorcycle.
And because Jessica Drew, so in the comics, that character is originally like a white woman, but they modified it obviously for this. And I am blanking on the actress.
Issa Rae.
Because I recognized the voice, but I was like, I know this voice. She was just so great, and I love how when Gwen sees her on the bike, and she's just like, "You're the coolest woman ever."
Right?
Yeah.
I want to be
Those
you.
like glasses and her hair, like how she was drawn was so amazing. And I also thought too, like I did love the constant jokes about his bleeding armpits.
About his what?
Bleeding armpits.
Oh yes,
Remember his
Oh,
his
yes,
husband, like,
yes.
Yeah.
they're like, what is he bleeding out of his armpits?
Yes.
But I'm like, I definitely recognized a lot of the spider suits. Like, especially in the first one, you could see some of the history from like that early cartoon.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, cool. Like, I could see, but I was like, all the different ways they imagine a spider suit. Like, the
Just
sheer creativity
amazing.
of it.
And also, one last other fun voice actor was Spider Noir. I don't think he had too many lines in this one, but in the first, Nicolas Cage
He
as
was
Spider
so
Noir.
good in the first one. I know, it was killing me not to text Adam.
Well, I love Jake Johnson in this. I feel like he brings a lot of sort of grounded kind of heart to these. When he shows up in the second one, like I was like, yeah, like verbally, like yay, he's back.
Me as well, and I will point out it is a very blink if you miss and you will miss it moment of the fact that in the first one, when he says he gets married, they show him stepping on the glass. So I'm like, oh, we have a Jewish Spider-Man. Hooray! Yeah. I mean, and even just Chris Pine voicing the first Peter Parker in Miles universe was just like perfection.
Just so good. Yeah.
And the scenes with him and his daughter, like Mayday, they're just so, she was just
man.
She was adorable.
Which is, sorry, I feel like we're sort of missing the elephant in the room, which is to take nothing away from, is it Shamik Moore? Do I have the pronunciation correct? Like, who plays Miles.
Incredible.
It's absolutely stunning. Like
the beating heart of this brand.
Like, you're so IP. On his, like I said, like I was so invested in Miles as a character who's, one reviewer described him. The original Peter Parker is Holden Caulfield with a spider. I was like, dang.
Not wrong.
It wasn't calling anybody phony, though.
Dang, because Holden Caulfield is like one of my least favorite literary characters of all time. So, but I feel like with Miles, like, teenage angst, it's not so much that you, like, as an adult, you can't.
He's so lovable.
Yeah.
And his mom, the performance that actress gives at Luna Laura Velez, I'll have to check it later. But yeah, she reeled me in. I owe most of the emotional impact that I experienced through the film to her monologue on the roof.
She was fantastic, and I think it was Brian Tyree.
Yeah.
He was playing the dad, Jefferson, or Jeff Morales. And I'm glad they didn't go with the whole Jefferson Davis thing, because, I mean, that's my last name, and ever since a kid, when I learned who that particular character...
No, they did.
Oh,
he is Jeff Davis in the movie.
Oh, okay.
And at first I was like, why don't they not have the same last name?
Right, but like that I was like, why did they name this black guy Jefferson Davis? Like, that's...
So the kid takes his mom's surname?
It's actually changed in the second movie.
Okay.
Because I looked it up in the first one, I remember.
Yeah, because I know in the comics and even like the video games, he's Jefferson Davis, and I'm just
that's
like,
so interesting.
Yeah, I'm like, well, that's an interesting name choice, but
yeah, he's credited as Jeff Morales in the second one.
Yeah, and here he's Jefferson Davis,
How about that?
Which he is also somebody who I love. Not to mention the great, amazing Mahershala Ali, who is.
Oh yeah, Prowler.
Like,
Aaron Davis, his uncle.
I was so excited for him in this movie because he's one of those ones where, like, I have loved him since, like, the first thing I've ever seen him in. He always plays, with maybe the exception of Moonlight, but even then, like, he always plays these, like, really, like, warm, loving people, and I'm like, he a bad guy, like, yes!
But still loving.
Yes.
But like a bad guy character. I was so into it. I was so excited to see him work against type and to be drawn incredibly differently than he actually looks, which, like, varied among some of the representations.
And even with him being playing like a villain role, I still appreciated how, you saw it more so in the first one, but how he connected with Miles, his nephew, and it was on the creative side of things. And like, how it just shows like a nuance and a human element to it. Even though he's a villain, he's just not like some mustache twirling, Saturday matinee villain time people the railroad tracks.
Something I really appreciated about this was, and in the first one too, no one's evil. No one's evil. Everyone just wants something different, or has like a really bad experience that they're grappling with badly, or, they're all just a product of their circumstances.
Even the Spot, like the main antagonist / villain of this movie.
Even the Spot.
He had a bad day, and you understand his motivations, and I like how they started with him being sort of this like joke kind of character, but as the movie goes on, he's more menacing, and in a way we're like, oh. And and you see like what his motivation is. Yeah,
so when he starts out, you're just like, what a joke. And by the end of it, he's grown. He's into this like sinister, imposing. Like, I was actually scared.
Yeah, it's interesting. So I had this debate with a friend a little while ago about whether they're just like people who do bad things or they're like bad people. And I'm like, I'm solidly in the bad people camp. Like, I mean, how many bad things do you have to do before I'm like, you're just a bad person? Like, So that's interesting, like, in terms of setting up vampire Spider-Man. What's his name?
Yeah. Oh, Miguel.
Miguel Spider-Man, like, is very much, like, taking a turn for evil towards...
But he thinks he's saving the world, right?
Right, because he's some of the canon events, and it was an interesting take, because the comic book where he's from, Spider-Man 2099, so it's like this whole line that they had, and I'm like, it was just an interesting rendition or variation of like that character.
Yeah, and I thought it was interesting because I think what's, like, sort of the legacy of Spider-Man that we can kind of get into is, like, he's just a more modern version of a superhero than, like, Batman and Spider-Man. Like, he's newer, right? He came, sort of, quote-unquote, of age in the 60s and 70s. But you have a very, like, kind of old-school version of comic book morality that you're sort of presented with at the end, where Miles is like, there has to be another way.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't agree that this is the only way, where I have to, have my father die. And it's like, that was a very, like, Superman would always find the way to do the right thing, Like, you could never convince Superman to do the bad thing, and then somehow it would all work out in the end. So I was like, it's interesting because it's sort of setting you up as him as the bad guy. So I'm curious to see how much more nuance, like, then transfers into the second half.
I mean, it's a fascinating proposition, isn't it, that Miguel O'Hara presents to him, that, like, the terrible things that happen to us are what connect us all, right?
Yeah, for all the Spider, like, they all have to suffer that traumatic event. And in a way, it's probably why they're able to bond, because they've all been through that specific experience.
Yeah, yeah. In one respect, like, looking at it from one angle, it's really quite beautiful that, like, these people, spider entities, are like a support group almost, that they can understand each other and support each other because they have been through the exact same thing. And then on the other hand, it's insupportable completely from Miles's point of view. Like, no, I'm sorry, I can't let my dad die.
But he's already also lost his uncle. So that's the confusing part to me. I was like, he's had his tragic loss.
No. Both those deaths always happen. There's always the uncle or aunt or whoever who dies, and then there's also the chief that dies. And then also a Gwen Stacy, a girlfriend that dies.
Yeah.
Okay, because like Gwen...
These are Spider-Man.
All right, so because it was like Gwen only has Peter Parker dying in her universe.
Well, but then
that was her uncle. That was like her first person dying. And
then now her dad's supposed to die, but now
he's not a police anymore. Police officer,
else.
And there was some kind of meta textual stuff going on with how Miguel's talking to Miles about, you really aren't supposed to even have been a Spider-Man.
Right.
Because that gets into some of, like, there was some backlash initially of, like, fandom, because people were like, why are you creating this new Spider-Man? He's Afro-Latino, and let's just say not all comic fans are
which was so
progressive.
Amazing too. Like, in terms of progressivity, I was really, really excited to have, like, a Latino Spider, like specifically an Afro-Latino, and I was like, that's great, like, because that's something that's, like, erased a lot for a lot of, like, Afro-Latino actors. Complain about how they're kind of only cast as Black. Mm-hmm. They're never cast as Latino, like Gina Torres in particular, but she's not the only one. Zoe Saldana, like
Giancarlo Esposito. I mean, more recently you've seen him in kind of Hispanic, but initially he was very much like, cast as just a Black.
And they were like, I it's annoying to me that you only think of Latino people as looking in a certain way, right? So although I did think it was funny when they're, like, calling out that the mom was like, I think this new Spider-Man might be Puerto Rican, and the guy, he's like, does he look more Dominican? I was like, ooh, that was pretty funny.
Well, and slight side, well, I guess not really a side, but
sorry, I already interrupted you. Keep going.
One of my favorite scenes involving that, early on in the movie, when the parents are meeting with, like, the guidance counselor talking about Miles' future, and then how you know, they're going through it. There's such a great scene in how upset his mother gets because he got to be in Spanish. She's like, what's going on here? I mean, and then just like the juxtaposition of that and like how they're, you know, trying to buy him time and he's dealing with the spot. It was just a really amazing sequence.
So actually that's something we didn't bring up, which I actually really appreciated about this movie, which is, it is genuinely funny in a lot of parts, and I'm and not in a terrible Marvel Disney funny way, like in an actually funny way,
like for real funny.
Yeah.
And not like, oh, we're meta and we're referring to ourselves, and oh, we have funny hero names.
And it's like we do like the corny
funny
humor. Yeah, I was like, because I'm like, we all know I'm so over it. I was over it 2 movies in. And I'm like, thank you, Sony. Please never give up these rights. Like, you firmly established why this should never be handed back to Disney. They're so pretty to look at. Like, I can't, like, I honestly genuinely, like, can't wait to see it again.
It's so beautiful.
I loved all of, like, I super, super loved Indian Spider-Man's costume.
Yes!
Mumbattan!
Yeah,
His costume and all the colors, like, it was fire. Like, it was so good.
That sequence was great. And I
was like, I will wear that as a Halloween costume. It was so pretty. I was so into it.
I loved his narration, too, for, like, that particular universe and how they even made, like, the reference about, oh, there's the, you know, British Museum where they stole all, the jabs, like, British imperialism.
It's
Yeah, or it's like saying bread.
I love that he and Hobie are friends. He's like, despite him being English, we're friends.
Yeah, just like, again, all the credit to the animation, but also Karen Sony is just like, he's so funny. Like, he can deliver anything and make it funny. Like, he's so good.
And yet the writing is the grounding for the writing and directing is just on point.
Yeah.
It's just perfect. It's just perfect in every way.
Yeah, it's so good. I'm so happy that you guys kind of talked me into this. Like, this, I don't think I ever would have seen it, and what a thing I would have been missing out on. So I was doing some background reading on Spider-Man. Like, so I gotta say, like, Spider-Man has never held any real appeal to me, the same way Batman has, but at least he has superpowers. Like, but he is, I think, Marvel's most popular character.
It's Spider-Man. Yeah, as far as solo character, that's like Spider-Man, Wolverine are definitely up there. Maybe the Hulk, because like the as far as popular culture. But Spider-Man easily is like the most popular.
When Halloween comes around, it's all the little kids are wearing the Spider-Man. Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So, what do you think is like Spider-Man's appeal?
Well, he's to me, I think it's like he's from the original rendition. He's from Queens, working class. He's always got money issues.
Yeah, and
he's just very relatable. I think to a lot of people. Like the whole background, and you know, he's unlike Batman, who I also like Batman's character, but like, you know, rich orphan versus guy being raised by his aunt and uncle, living in Queens, and like just trying to get by, and it's just so relatable. And then the way they updated with like Miles, also very, I think, relatable in a modern context, because different demographics from like when Spider-Man was originally created back in the 60s, and it's like Miles is going to be like the Spider-Man, I think, for a lot of like kids growing up today.
Yeah. Wait, sorry, where is he from again? Queens?
Well, Peter Parker's from Queens.
Yeah. Miles is from Brooklyn. Okay. Yeah. Like, just seeing him on the rooftop with his, like, you know, black and brown family and friends, you know, with the DJ playing, you know, Latino music, like that is today's Spider-Man, right? That is, you know, the guy who is struggling to reach his full potential in a world that doesn't open doors for him necessarily to do that.
Yeah. Well, so what's interesting is, you know, so Superman and I guess Captain America, like, they were all created out of, like, you know, the World War II era, right? They were there to punch Nazis, like.
Yeah.
And they were there in a very sort of morally black and white scenario, like, America good, Nazis bad, right? Like, it was pretty unequivocal.
Captain America too, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And it also helps that they were both created. Well, both those characters created by Jewish comic book creators.
All of them were created.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Jack Kirby is like Jacob Kurtzfeldt, and Stanley is Stan Lieberman. Like, they're all Jewish.
Yeah.
All of them. But I think to that extent, like, only Superman is.
He's Moses, essentially.
Well, Kal-El, like,
Yeah.
there's just so much in Superman canon that is sort of implicitly Jewish. It's really not in the rest of them, but being as that may, like, you have sort of Spider-Man come along in the 60s in this, Vietnam, Cold War area, and I think, so as I understand it, like, the morality isn't so black and the morality of the Vietnam War is what? Like, good idea?
Well, and that's the big appeal to like Marvel Comics, like in the 60s with that whole Silver Age reboot where they had more morally nuanced character, and also like they felt more human. Whereas like the DC characters, like Batman, they felt almost kind of like gods, so to speak, like as far as like how they're portrayed. But the Marvel characters felt a lot more realistic, and I think that's a big part of like why Spider-Man has just resonated so much because he's very relatable.
Right. And so you get this sort of like morally nuanced Marvel superhero who sort of kind of carries us into the modern times, where to the point where I'm like, you can't make a good Superman movie because you keep trying to make him like dark or whatever, and you're like, that's not Superman. Like, he's a real simple guy. You are better off with the sort of Christopher Reeves and personal favorite Dean Cain version than like, whatever you were trying to do with Henry Cavill. Like, it didn't work. Like, it doesn't, you can't modernize Superman in that way. Like, it just does not, or you're like rewriting it to such an extent that like, why even have it be Superman?
It's like trying to make James Bond feminist. Like, just leave it.
Yeah, that's not who that character is in least.
Let's just move forward with Miles Morales, please.
Yeah, which then, gives us, I think, the X-Men, which are the most nuanced of the group. Which I didn't realize, like I said, I've been doing my homework and like thinking about like, where Spider-Man stands in terms of the comic book evolution, and it really seems like he was kind of the first modern character as we think of them now.
But
yeah, and Stan Lee did say like it wasn't intentional, or we didn't think of it at the time, that like Spider-Man is the first character who has no skin showing, so that literally anyone can be Spider-Man.
Wow,
right?
I never thought about it like that.
Yeah, he's fully encased.
Like, to the public, he could be anything.
Right. So
right.
under that suit, literally anyone could be Spider-Man. And I was like, that is super cool. And you kind of wonder if it did on a certain level play on our subconscious to increase Spider-Man's popularity of like anyone can be Spider-Man. Like, whereas like, it's Superman's like from another, like, it's like none of us can be Superman.
Nobody can be Superman.
You see Batman's like part of his face with like the cow. Yeah, I never thought about that with Spider-Man.
Maybe we can be Batman.
Dude.
We just gotta get a lot of money. Yeah.
But isn't that at the heart of this chapter?
Yes, very much so. Very much so, that anyone can be Spider-Man. Although, like, again, I also did think it was interesting is, I guess Peter Parker does somewhat age through various iterations of the comics, but like he is a teenager.
And
as well. He's not like a grown up.
Until he is.
Yeah, he's one of the few characters who actually has like age, because like he starts off as a teenager, but he goes to college like in the comic continuity, gets married to Mary Jane. I mean, he's one of the few characters where they've actually allowed to like progress like through his life.
Yeah. Which is interesting, too, because they were talking about, like, an article I was reading was saying, like, again, in the 60s, like, that's where, like, sort of in the 50s is, like, where the concept of having a teenager existed, right? Like, teenagers didn't, as a word, like, didn't exist before then. And so, like, that's the sort of beginning of teen culture, so then you have this, like, teen superhero. And it's interesting because you're like, of course there's all this debate about, like, whether or not, like, grown-up people are going to be able to relate to a teenager. And now we're living in the time where, like, the sort of YA explosion and everyone's worried about how adults just want to see shows about teenagers. And so I thought that was like an interesting, like, how novel it was at the time when Spider-Man came up, and like how maybe problematic it is for us today.
I think the heart of this film is like a black and brown person trying to enter arenas that he feels he belongs in,
Right.
where he can contribute, and those arenas saying, you don't belong here.
Right.
And
Right.
don't upset the social order.
Yes. And you do also have like other adult Spider-Man, Spider people, because that's the sort of universe it's set in, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and like, I think it's really heartbreaking to watch a brown man tell a young black brown man that he does not belong and that he needs to get back in line and stop upsetting the social order. It was one of the moments when I burst into tears in the film. And watching when they're crawling up the tower,
Mm-hmm.
and Miguel is like, he's coming from a real place. He's coming from a place where he was like, as a brown, and it seems like he might be biracial because his name is O'Hara.
Yeah, he's
Right.
He's like Hispanic and Irish as far in the comics.
The most Catholic thing you can possibly be. Yeah. And he has tried to overthrow the social order,
Right, he's speaking from
And
experience.
and it destroyed everything. And because he couldn't make it work, because it went badly for him, it can't work for anyone else. And that's like dark. That is dark. And in that same moment, Miles's white female best friend and his white mentor are looking up at him, and they don't know how to support him, and they don't know how to help him, and they think it also might be true. They think Miguel might be right. And so they're trying to stop him too. And everyone in his world, all the people he thought were going to support him in his endeavor to become like a black-brown hero, are trying to hold him back and keep him from doing what he knows is right.
And an interesting subtext with that too is when he's trying to escape later on, after that. I think it's Spider Bite's her name. I can't, but she's a black spider woman. Helps him, like, cause
Right.
she could, but she decides
She
to help him.
makes
So
the
like, she makes a choice to help
Right.
Miles, like, even though he's not going home. You know, he thinks she thinks. Well, he goes to the other universe, but she makes
knows,
a choice. She
yeah.
makes a choice to help him.
Right.
Right.
As does Hobie unequivocally very
Right,
early on.
right.
Like he's been on his
Precisely.
side the entire time. Yeah, I didn't notice that until you brought it up. It's like,
Yeah.
who's unequivocal. I do think though, like, it's interesting because, you know, from the perspective of like the established elite, it was like, I was you once kid. We all grow up and like we all fall in line and like we
Right.
all learn our lesson, right? But on the other hand, you're like, I am somewhat a little frustrated by like my personal individual love for my father like overrides everybody else's love for their father because I'm willing to sacrifice my entire planet for this one person. You're like, that is not a great hill to die on, my friend.
But it's one that
it's
you
not
can
the moral
understand.
stance you think it is.
But it's one that people can understand because like it's not a logical decision that you're asking someone to make there.
Mhm.
No, but it is a childish one. And I guess that's sort of my point, right? Like, it is partly defensible because Miles is 15. And so I think, to me, like, it operates on a secondary level where there's, like, an adult going, like, my dude, like, I need you to grow up and see the bigger picture here. And Miles is like, no, I don't wanna. And it's like,
Well, how often do you think about like what teenage you would do? Like as an adult, you're like, oh, I understand why adults were telling me certain things, but like at that age, I didn't have the life experience. So I'm just saying, like, oh, you're just raining on the parade, or I don't want to listen to you. It's
that wasn't true for me. The adults in my life were completely wrong.
Cheers to that. Yeah.
No, absolutely. And somebody once pointed out, like, I mean, that is basically the plot of every teenage movie. It's like some sort of teen rebellion, and the adults were wrong all along, and it's the teenagers who have to solve the problem. But I think it's interesting because viewed through, the movie really posits it a couple different ways, and it's like view for the lens of like race and ethnicity. It tells one story. View through the lens of age and experience, it tells a different story. Like, I'm I was absolutely devastated to find out this was, like, not a complete story, because I'm like, I need to know what happens next. Like, I can't wait. I don't like to wait. I like to, like, only see movies, like, or read books, like, once the whole series is done, I'm like, okay, now I can start. I have no patience.
No, I'm the same.
And something I just realized as you were talking, Nicole, if you think about sort of like the two protagonists, Miles and Gwen, who their mentors are, and we're thinking about how people develop. So, like, Peter is obviously Miles' mentor, and he has a daughter, and then Gwen's mentor is Spider-Woman, and she's pregnant. So you're thinking like, oh, it's these adults who are about to have children that are like mentoring the teenagers, and like that's just like an interesting sort of juxtaposition that they have in the film, at least to me.
Yeah.
And that's so like developmentally accurate, right? Like when you're that age, you don't need your parents anymore. You need mentors outside your family to kind of show you, to take you to the next level of who you are.
Right, and I think probably like why they are willing to be mentors, because they're about to have their own children. One has, and the other's about to have a child. And like, it's just an interesting thing where you just see like the different sort of like stages of like spider people.
It's the circle of life.
Yeah, well, and it sort of speaks to like, I think that's a really good point, and it's like part of the mom's speech is like, I've done all I can do. Like right? Like, you have to go someplace else in the world and fit in. You can always come back here, and you should always come back here and know your love. But like, whatever this next phase of life is for you, I can't like, I wasn't part of it, so I have no wisdom to pass on, right? Like, you do have to leave the nest, and you have to find other people who've had these experiences who can shepherd you through them. Like, and I think like that is a really important part of our development.
And she asked,
100%.
like, just please take my voice in your head
with
you, saying that you are worthy and you belong.
Right. Don't ever let anyone make you feel like you don't belong. And that resonates with Miles as Miguel's talking, like, him, like, so much of the movie just comes in, like, it's just beautifully written, and, like, you can tell a lot of thought and effort went into just creating this film.
Yeah. And each of the people too, like each of the characters, and in a very strong statement of like, it's interesting because they kind of can't escape the way that like, so they talk about the canon, right? Like, you have to lose somebody, like you have to go through those life stages. But the movie is at its heart, especially stylistically, about like, you're a product of your environment, right? You're the version of Spider-Man that's a product of your world, right? And that
the influences around you.
Yeah. We all have the same canon, we all have the same origin story, and there's ties that bind, but we're all actually very different from each other based on, whatever incubator we came out of.
Which sets up the end of the cliffhanger. Like, it sets up the cliffhanger, right? Like, if your uncle had not died and he had been your primary influence, what would you have become?
Yeah.
And he has to face that now. Literally, he has to face that version of himself.
Yeah. Yeah, that's
heavy.
Yeah. Such a great movie.
Yes. All right. So, wrapping that up. Social impact score. So, I think these are doing really well. Someone else always looks at the box up. Anyone?
Oh yeah, it definitely did great the first week box office. There was, there's always a drop off after the second weekend, but
sure.
It was number one, and it made a lot more than Into the Spider-Verse did. Like I don't know exactly how much, but it was significantly more.
It was exactly a whole heap of money, is what it made. Yeah.
I mean, the technical term is a whole heap of money. Yeah. So, social impact score for the whole thing, right? Like, not this one.
I think that's
including Into the Spider-Verse as well.
Oh, to me,
whatever the sequel.
It's easily a 10 out of 10 for me.
So, like I said, I hadn't felt this way since I saw Little Mermaid. I also hadn't had this feeling coming out of a theater thinking, I just saw something important. Since I walked out of Brokeback Mountain, which is my only other 10, I give this a 10 because I'm going to tell you why. Because that theater on a Sunday at 3 p.m. was sold out, and it was full of families with kids of all different colors, a lot of brown kids, a lot of black kids, and they're all going to go out into the world feeling like they belong in whatever arena they step into. If they want to be Spider-Man, they can be Spider-Man. If they want to be nuclear researchers, they could be a nuclear researcher. And if when my nephew and niece in 10 years, who are both Latino, if when they enter the workforce, they have that feeling, if they experience the indirect effects of this movie that everyone went and saw, that is a 10. That is a 10 for me.
Yeah, I'm conflicted.
It's okay to not, it's okay to not get a 10, right?
No, and I think, so on the one hand, so this is always like movies and life as we know it are forever changed, like, its place in sort of changing movies, I hope, is very firmly established. This movie, like, single-handedly re-justified the art and craft of animation.
Absolutely.
Yes, I agree.
Absolutely.
And I would say for me, I haven't felt this strongly about an animated movie since Coco. And I love Coco because I think the animation is so beautiful and perfectly done. And to me, like, this movie as an animated movie, I'm like, I hope this is just such a landmark moment of, this is such a beautiful art form, and there are stories that are absolutely best told.
Thank you.
In this format.
Period.
Everything is lost and nothing is gained by taking this out of animation and putting it into live action. So that's for sure 10 out of 10. The messaging, I think, is good, but I don't know that it's so life-altering. So, like, there's just, like, a lot of things, I think, that fit into that category. So I'm so close. I'm going to go with a 9. All right. Recommendations?
So if you like multiverse movies, I would also recommend Everything Everywhere All at Once. Won Best Picture at the Oscars, and one of the most fun and creative spins on a multiverse movie that I've ever seen. So if you enjoyed this movie, I'd also recommend checking out. It's live action, and a lot of similar elements too, where you're dealing with like a Chinese American family, dealing with a lot of like family issues. So some parallels to what's going on here. But just a fun movie where you're dealing with like alternate universes.
I'll recommend for your Juneteenth weekend, The Blackening. This movie is fun, P-H-U-N, fun. And if you're a horror movie fan and you know all the tropes, it's a lot of fun to watch all those, each and every one of those tropes be turned on its head over the course of an hour and a half. So yeah.
I am going to recommend, because I have done nothing but talk of Karen and Sony, I'm going to recommend the TV show Miracle Workers, which is an anthology comedy show. Unusual. So every season, totally different storyline, everybody plays a different character. It has an incredible ensemble cast with, yes, Karen Sony, Daniel Radcliffe, and Geraldine Viswanathan. Go check out our episode on Blockers from back in the day. All right, with that end, we hope you are liking our new, more collaborative, shaking it up with Movies That Matter, mixing and mingling. Tell us that you do. We're on YouTube, we're on Facebook. You can email us at moviesmatterpod@gmail.com. Check out our website, moviesthatmatterpodcast.com. And as always, remember, movies matter.
And so do you.
We'll see you next time.